بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So last week I had begun the discussion about the issue of qasr, and I said that there's still much more to do this week inshallah ta'ala, and so I will divide today's response into two. Firstly, we're going to continue from where we left off. And then secondly, there's an issue that some people wrote to me about last week, so I'm going to get back to that. Also, I got a lot of feedback. A lot of people said you gave a 45-minute talk and we're not able to listen to 45 minutes. So I'm just going to give the 1-minute response from last week, that safar is not a distance, it is a state of mind. And that you are a musafir when you travel outside of your city to a distance that you and a reasonable person as well, because we don't want to say a crazy person says across the street this is safar. Somebody like a aqil, baligh person would say this is a travel. And what this means is that it is relative, and what it means is that you don't need to ask a faqih. If you are asking somebody, you don't understand the response. You do not come to a sheikh and say, Sheikh, I travel from this to this, am I musafir? You know when you are musafir. And it is possible that two people can do the same journey and one of them considers musafir and the other not, depending on their culture and habit. The one who takes a private jet every day to work 200 miles away and he goes at 8 a.m., comes back at 5 p.m. is not a musafir. And the one who goes the same distance for a one-day trip and he's not a regular and he's going, it's up to your mindset and your culture and your habit. So you know when you are a musafir. That is a 2-minute response. Jayyid. We now move on, and I'm going to come back to one issue at the end. We move on by stating today we're going to do inshallah a number of things. The first of them is that, is qasr obligatory or not? Is qasr wajib or not? Generally speaking, majority of the scholars said that it is mustahab. You should pray the 4 rak'at as 2, but it is not wajib. Hence, if a person performs for whatever reason the full prayer and they are musafir, the prayer is valid. They are not sinful, but they have gone against the sunnah. So, when you are in the state of safar, you are rewarded by Allah for praying 2, not for praying 4. Every 4 rak'ah becomes 2. Ibn Umar said, hadith is in Bukhari, I did safar with the Prophet ﷺ and with Abu Bakr and with my father Umar. And in every journey, every time we prayed qasr. This was their habit. So qasr is the default. To not do qasr goes against the sunnah, but it is something that the salah is not going to be batil. It is permissible, but it goes against the sunnah. So the point here, qasr is rewarded by Allah. No one should think that if I pray 4, I'm going to get extra reward. No, qasr is rewarded by Allah. Jayyid. Second point, when does qasr begin? Once you've decided it is qasr for me. So this Friday I'm going to Atlanta, clearly that is qasr for me. When will qasr begin? When I pack my bags, I'm about to leave for the airport, it's dhuhr time, right? Can I start my qasr knowing I'm stepping out the door and I'm heading to the airport? I'll say, let me just do qasr and jama' dhuhr and asr, get it out of the way. Can I do qasr from my house? How about if I get to the plane and I'm waiting and it's almost maghrib time finishing, or let me just pray dhuhr asr on the plane, but I'm still in my city? Or when does qasr begin? So again, as you can imagine, there are a number of opinions. However, the overwhelming majority of the Sahaba and Tabi'un, they had one opinion. So alhamdulillah, we can say, in this case, we have a vast majority who says safar begins when you travel outside of the walls of the city. When you leave the final habitations of the city and you are now, your back is to the city and you're walking away, you're going out. Even if you can still see the city, but you have left the premise of your land, not your country, but your city. And there are numerous narrations from the Sahaba themselves. Of them is that some of the Sahaba, they would break their fast. It's Ramadan, they're going to go on a long journey, so you're not going to fast that day. But they're fasting when they wake up. You cannot just wake up in Ramadan and say, oh, I have a safar at 6, let's say 2 p.m., let's say, and say, I'm not going to fast today. No, you are Ramadan, you are not musafir. Now, imagine in those days you're walking at 7 a.m., you're not going to be able to fast, right? You know you're going to break your fast. You are still starting in Ramadan, you're going to be fasting. Some of the Sahaba, when they walked outside the city, he said to his servant, okay, give me the water now. Give me something now to break. I have a long day ahead. We don't need, we're going to break the fast anyway. And his servant said, I can see the walls of the city. He said, doesn't matter, give it to me now. We're safar now. The safar is done. Even if you can see the walls of the city, but you are left the premises. Now, in those days they had walls. In our times, there is no wall, so you have to use a bit of a cultural thing because, habitation goes smaller and smaller. You get to smaller and smaller places, but there is still something called the overall city of Dallas. And it's not an exact line, but you get the point that when you have left and you feel that, okay, now I am no longer in my city of residence, then safar can begin, and that is when you can start your qasr when you do that. And this is proven in actually a hadith of Anas ibn Malik that he said that we prayed dhuhr 4 rak'ah in Medina. This is going for Hajj. Then when we got to Dhul Hulayfa, we prayed 2 rak'ah. Dhul Hulayfa is literally a 10-minute drive from Medina. It's definitely not 4 burud or 16 farsakh, not at all. Dhul Hulayfa is 10 minutes. Those of you that have done Umrah from Medina, you know this. Dhul Hulayfa is literally outside, but it is outside the city. So Anas says, in Medina we prayed 4. When we got to Dhul Hulayfa, we prayed 2. Even though you haven't gone the distance, even if you followed the 4 burud or whatever positions, you're still within that, but safar has begun. So safar, when does it begin? It begins when you leave the area, city of your inhabitants. This is the second point. The third point, a lot of times questions comes about musafir praying behind muqim, muqim praying behind musafir, etc. I just want to do this quickly, that pretty much there is unanimous consensus in this regard that if a musafir is praying behind a muqim, you are traveling, you have the permissibility to pray 2 rak'ah, but you come to a masjid. Now the imam is not traveling and the imam prays 4. Pretty much, I would say, there's 1 or 2, but essentially by unanimous consent, almost, you must pray 4 rak'ahs. Why? Because in the hadith, the imam has been made to be followed. إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ. Once you join the congregation, you are following the imam. And praying the full 4, it is permissible. It's not haram for you. It's permissible. And following the imam is wajib. So we prefer the wajib over the permissible, because praying 2 is sunnah, praying 4 is jaiz. It's permissible, but it's against, if you were alone, it would be against the sunnah. But now that you're in a jama'ah, you will pray all 4. And the opposite also applies. If the musafir is leading, as we all know, and this is reported from the Sahaba, some of them, they led the salah, and after 2 rak'ah, they finished, and they said that, Inna qawmun ala safar, that we are a people who are traveling, so you continue your salah. So the imam prayed 2 rak'ah, and obviously everybody knows this. If you're not musafir, you don't just get a concession because the imam is praying 2 rak'ah. No, you have to pray the full 4. By the way, that having been said, even though it is allowed for the imam who's musafir to pray 2, some of our scholars have said that if there's like a jama'ah, it would be better for him to pray 4 to not cause confusion. Because these days people don't know fiqh and whatnot, and the imam prays 2 and it's asr or maghrib or isha, like what is going on? It's jaiz for the imam, and in this case the imam, in his heart he wants to follow the sunnah, but for the sake of the congregation, he's like not to make them confused. And me personally, as a rule, if I'm leading in a masjid, if I'm leading 3-4 people, okay, they know, we can tell. But if I'm leading in a masjid, I'm invited everywhere. Every time I lead in a masjid, I never do 2 rak'ah, because there's 200 people, 500 people, and just for my convenience, they're going to make them confused. And our scholars have said this, that the imam has the option. Now you should weigh the pros and cons. So nonetheless, if I were to do this, or anybody were to do this, it is jaiz, and the announcement can be made, and the imam will pray 2, and the people behind will pray 4 rak'ah. The next point here is that suppose you are traveling and you are going to reach home, and so you have the option. You're going to reach home within the time of salah. Let's give a simple example. Maghrib comes in, let's say, simplistically at 7 p.m., let's just say. And you will be home by 6 p.m., okay? You will be home by 6 p.m. So you know that you will be able to pray dhuhr and asr at home. You know you can pray dhuhr and asr at home. And you know I can stop on this road and pray, or I can masjid in the street or whatever, in the other area I can pray. You have an option. What should you do? Response, it is completely up to you. The Sharia is neutral. Which one should you prefer? If you choose to stop, you are still musafir, so you will pray 2 and 2. However, if you get home, you are no longer musafir. And even though you are forgiven for the qasr, as we're going to come to in a while, now you must pray 4 and 4. Okay? So, if you stop on the road, even though you can make it home in time, it is permissible. Why? Because Allah Azza wa Jal has linked qasr with safar. And if you are in safar, qasr is allowed. And there is no guarantee. Anything can happen. Your car can break down, a traffic jam. There is no guarantee that you will get exactly on time. So you make an assumption. Therefore, the Sharia does not hold you accountable for your assumption. If you're musafir, you do qasr. And if you get home, you no longer do qasr. So that is the option up unto you. Okay, the next question, which is the long one now. How long can you do qasr for? How long can you do qasr for? This is the big issue of today. So we divide this question, this is question number 5 I'm doing in today, into 2 scenarios, 5A and 5B. The first scenario is that, well, before we even get there, before 5A and 5B, we're talking about, what is the scenario talking about? We're talking about you have arrived at a temporary destination. We are not talking about en route. That's not, no scholar says that there's a limit en route. People would take 2.5 months or 3 months to go from Morocco to Mecca. 3 months, and the whole route is obviously qasr, because you're musafir. You're walking, riding camel, whatnot. There is no question about the time frame of the safar itself. Okay? And subhanAllah, by the way, these days it takes us less than 17 hours, 15 hours, direct flight, Dallas to Australia. And I've done that flight as well, subhanAllah. Direct flight, and subhanAllah, it took them 3 months to do a 4-hour, 5-hour flight. And Allah's blessings on us, we just do the whole world and we come back, subhanAllah. It's Allah's blessings on us. So, point being that nobody is questioning the length of the safar, however long it is, you will do qasr. Now you get to your temporary destination. This is not your house. You are sent by your company to a city for training. Okay, you're visiting friends. You're attending a shadi, wedding somewhere. You're staying for X number of days. You are now in a hotel or in somebody's house. You are no longer on the road. This is the scenario. Okay, understood? Now, this scenario is divided into 2, 5A and 5B. Scenario A. You genuinely do not know when you will be returning, and every day presents the potential of you returning. Now, this is difficult for us to imagine because we book our flights. Let me give you, in the good old days, you had multiple such issues. Of them, you were engaged in an actual war, and you're sent to the front of the line. And every day, you don't know, you might be moving somewhere, you might be staying, you might be attacking, you might be withdrawing. Every day is a state of uncertainty. Another example, which may be realistic, suppose you're driving and it is winter time and you're in a cold place and the roads are shut down because of snow. And you want to leave, but you don't know when the roads will open. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 3 days, maybe 5 days. You don't know. So you wake up every day wanting the road to be open, but you don't know how long. So if you are in a state of uncertainty, in this case, your ruling is the ruling of the actual musafir, because you want to leave or you don't know when you will leave. And it is authentically reported that Ibn Umar and others, they were in Azerbaijan and they did qasr for more than 6 months. Some say, some Sahaba did qasr for 2 years in the battlefield. Like, battlefield means they were on the front lines, moving here, moving there. They're not obviously fighting every day, but they are in the state of the battlefield. Every day, tactical maneuver, this and that. They're praying qasr for 2 years because they're not setting up house. They're not building an apartment complex and getting married and having kids. This is a obvious state of flux. So, if you do not know when you will return, then you will remain in qasr because it is uncertain. It could be you return today. It could be you return tomorrow, a week. You don't know. Now, that scenario is, I think, rare for most of us. The other scenario is going to be the big controversial issue. What if you have a good idea? I'm staying here 5 days. That's my intention. You intend to stay 7 days, 1 week. Your company sends you for an assignment, and it is a 3-month-long assignment. You know it is 3 months. And after 3 months, that's it. You're going to come back home. Or you send for training, 6 weeks training. And you know it's training. So you know exactly how long it is going to be. So this issue is the one that, just like last week, there's lots of opinions. In fact, some ulama have listed 20 opinions on this issue. 20 different opinions. Some have said the duration is 20 days long. Ibn Abbas and Ishaq ibn Rahway said 19 days long. Hadith is in Bukhari that Ibn Abbas said, once I prayed with the Prophet ﷺ 19 days doing qasr. This was in Tabuk. So if I'm traveling for 19 days, I'll do qasr. And if I'm traveling for more than that, I won't do qasr. Who said this? Ibn Abbas, not the Prophet ﷺ. He's deriving from Tabuk that he stayed there 19 days doing qasr, so that's my limit that I have derived. Other scholars said 17, others said 13, Al-Awza'i said 12, Ali ibn Abi Talib said 10 days, Hassan al-Basri said 3 days, Rabi'at al-Ra'i said 1 day. If you were going to stay 1 day, you stop praying qasr. And so in early Islam, we had over 20 opinions about this, how long. Once again, all of them are trying to derive from the life of the Prophet ﷺ a number. Our Prophet ﷺ did not explicitly state, you may continue to do qasr for this many days and then you must swap over. In the famous books of hadith, there is nothing like this whatsoever. What do we have? Derivations. Like we explicitly found Anas deriving. Anas said, I accompanied the Prophet ﷺ for 19 days. And we did qasr. So I have derived from this, if I travel for 19, I'll do qasr. And if it's more than 19, I won't do qasr. So he is getting it from the qasr of the Prophet for 19 days. Now, obviously, once upon a time, fiqh was much more vibrant and ulama were giving their positions. And then we have the era of the flourishing of the madhabs, and then we have the era of the codification and ossification. So what happens is, out of all of these 20 opinions, essentially only 2 make their way into the madhabs, okay? Because again, fiqh had different stages, and the madhabs basically evolved and codified and then made things in many ways easy as well, and in many ways, as we said, they kind of had their position. So essentially what happened is we have 2 major camps. The first camp is the Hanbali and the Shafi'i and the Maliki school. And essentially, all of these say that the qasr is only done for 3 days. If you know you're going to spend more than 3 days, then no qasr. So now, I said generally, technically the Hanbali say 20 salah. 20 salah. So they count by salah. Okay? So they will literally count by salah. Whereas the Shafi'i say you ignore the day of arrival. And so basically there's, essentially it's 3 days. So basically the issue of 20 salah for the Hanbalis, and then Malikis and Shafi'is say that once you go to the 4th day, then you become a muqim. Okay, so once you get to the 4th day, then you are no longer able to do safar. And what is their main evidence? And again, all of these are derived. We have evidences, but they're derived, they're extracted from things of the Prophet ﷺ. The Hanbalis, they bring forth the hadith in Sahih Muslim that the Prophet, not Sahih Muslim, Abu Dawood, that the Prophet ﷺ, he arrived in Mecca to perform Hajj basically, on the morning of the 4th of Dhul Hijjah, and he prayed Fajr in Mecca. And he prayed all of the 4th and all of the 5th and 6th and 7th, all of them in Qasr, and that was 20 salah. Then he prayed Fajr outside of Mecca in the valley of Abtah, and Qasr began from there in Mina. So they derived 20 salah from the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th of Dhul Hijjah. Okay, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th of Dhul Hijjah, and do the numbers 5, 10, 15, 20 salawat. Okay, the other 3 madhabs, they said I made a mistake clearly. It was not 3 days, it was 4 days. I made a mistake. Beyond the 4th day, I wanted to say, not beyond the 3rd day. Beyond the 4th day. So the other 3 madhabs also derive the 4th day. That if you are traveling for 4 days, the final of the 4th day, you will not do qasr. However, the way that they calculated it, they said you don't look at the day you arrive. You look at the evenings. So the Shafi'is might allow 22 salah, let's say. Okay? But definitely not 25 salah. So the Shafi'is and the Malikis are a little bit different in how they define, but essentially the time frame is 20 salahs for the Hanbalis and 4 days for the others. Not 3 days, it was a mistake, slip of the tongue, 4 days. Now, this is the other madhabs. Now, another evidence that they use, they have a number of derivations that the Prophet ﷺ told the Muhajirin to not stay longer than 3 days in Mecca. But again, the response is that was about the Muhajir. They were prohibited from returning to Mecca permanently. Once you've done Hijrah to Medina, you're not allowed to reside in Mecca. And their point is, okay, this is residing, that the prohibition is there. So once again, they derive it from there. So this is the 3 madhabs. The Hanafis are the only madhab that took another position, and that is 15 days. 15 days. And they don't have any explicit evidence for 15, but they make qiyas upon various things which are a bit like, they're not directly related. Like for example, what is the maximum number of tuhur days, yani of the lady of hayd? It's not exactly related to salah, but they somehow derive from this that you can stay 15 days. And so on the 16th day, if you're going to stay 16 days or more, then you are not allowed to do qasr. Okay, you must perform the full salah. Now, obviously, you heard me last week and we went over that the distances are all derived. Well, now you've seen yourself that the numbers that people are taking are also extracted, nothing explicit. So, whoever wishes to follow their madhab, alhamdulillah, that is good. And as you know my position, I encourage the following of the madhabs, generally speaking. But I am not a fanatical follower. I don't think it is healthy for every single issue, especially those that deal with modern issues of living in the modern world. And this is, leave it to our modern scholars to talk about. Sometimes we need to rethink through. So in this issue, if you wish to follow your madhab, I have told you what it is. For 3 of the madhabs, it is 20 rak'ah or 4 days, and for the Hanafis, it is 15 days. As usual, Ibn Taymiyyah comes along and he rocks the boat. And it's not only Ibn Taymiyyah, others as well. And Ibn Taymiyyah is very clear that whoever says that there is a number of days that you're going to be musafir, either 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 or 15, has brought forth a statement upon which there is no evidence. La dalila alayhi. This is Ibn Taymiyyah's position, that there is no evidence from the Sharia. Now, the problem with this is the implication is that you could be musafir for long period of time. What if your company sends you for 6 months? Isn't that common? That you have an assignment for 6 months? And so for 6 months, are you going to be musafir for 6 months? Believe it or not, some modern followers of Ibn Taymiyyah, including our dear Sheikh and teacher, my own teacher, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, Allah yarhamu, he would very clearly give this fatwa. He would follow this to its logical conclusion, even though Ibn Taymiyyah never said that, by the way. I mean, means he didn't open the door for 6 months. I mean, but our Shaykh, may Allah bless him, and again, to quote an opinion is simply, this is not an emotional thing. A'udhu billah, I love him more than anybody can who hasn't studied with him. But it is an opinion of his, and I respectfully disagree. But he would publicly say this. I heard this with my own ears, and it's well known in his fatwa. Students would come to him. He's of course a Saudi scholar. Saudi students were sent to this country. I think now it's almost dwindled down, but they were sent to this country for 4 years at a time, 5 years at a time. Student comes to him and says, Sheikh, the government has sent me to America for 4 years. And I know I'm here for 4 years. I have no intention of remaining for more than 4 years. May I consider myself a musafir? And he would very publicly say, yes, you are a musafir. Now that position is almost unprecedented and unheard of. But it is the logical conclusion if you go the full way. Ibn Taymiyyah himself did not go that far. Ibn Taymiyyah is very clear. Somebody asked him, and I have the references here, that I intend to stay in a city for 1 month and then I plan to return. Ibn Taymiyyah said that the better opinion for you, the safer position for you is that you do not do qasr for 1 month. You pray the full for 1 month. This is explicit. Like, this is too long. What he's trying to say, this Ibn Taymiyyah's position is basically the one I'm very sympathetic to, which is use your common sense, but don't be foolish. Like the 4-day limit or the 20 rak'ah limit, what if it's 21 rak'ah? It changes? It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's too hardcore, or demarcation is too black and white. Now, the defense of the fuqaha is we want that demarcation to be black and white. We want it to be explicit, or else we open the door of confusion. And they're absolutely right, it does. It does open the door for confusion if you want to. That's why Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa was, whoever wants to stick with 4 days, alhamdulillah, good, that is the majority opinion. But if you are going for a reasonable amount of time. Now, what is the position that I personally follow in my life? The way that I view my safar, if I'm living out of a suitcase, then I'm musafir. If I'm going, at times I have been for 5 days to a city. 5 days is more than the 4-day limit, okay? But 5 days is, for me, complete safar. I am not, however, if somebody were to go and rent an apartment, even if it's a long-term, month-by-month apartment, okay? For example, if somebody goes and finds out where's the masjid, where's the halal food. If somebody goes and enrolls his kids in the school and says, I'm only here for 6 months, but my kids, this is not safar anymore now, So again, it's a logical or reasonable frame of mind. Like, are you even temporarily settling down? In my humble opinion, 6 months, you are settling down. You're going to have a car or means of transportation. You're going to know the restaurants, halal restaurants. You're going to make some friends. Like, you're going to have some social life there. Whereas 4 or 5 days, you might just be in your bubble of corporate and back to the hotel and corporate and back to the hotel. You know what that psychological frame is. So, bottom line, Ibn Taymiyyah's position, if you want to stick to the 4, it's fine. If it's a little bit more than this, okay, no big deal, as long as you're actually musafir. Okay, so this is what I agree with, and inshallah that is the correct one. Okay, the final issue before I get back to the other issue that I needed to, because there's 2 issues I need to do. And we didn't talk about jama'. We talked about qasr. We did not talk about jama'. Let's talk about jama' quickly. Jama' means you combine Dhuhr and Asr and you combine Maghrib and Isha. There is no other permutation of Jama'. You cannot do Jama' with Fajr. You cannot do Jama' with Asr and Maghrib. These are the only permutations. Jayyid. The issue of Jama' is not allowed by the Hanafis for travel. The Hanafi ulama only allow Jama' for the Hajj. In Hajj and Arafat. That's the only time they allow Jama'. For them, Jama' is something the pilgrims do in Arafat, not even in Mina. And they have their, they have their ways of looking at those hadith, because there's at least 10 hadith that the Prophet ﷺ prayed qasr in traveling, jama' in traveling, at least 10 in Bukhari and Muslim. It's actually very explicit. Nonetheless, the madhabs, we respect them, and so the Hanafis, they said, one of them said this is jama' suri, i.e. you think it's jama' but it's not jama'. For example, if Asr comes in at 4 p.m., jama' suri means you pray dhuhr at 3:50 and then 3:55, mashallah, okay, even more. Depends on how much taqwa you have when you pray dhuhr. So our imam wants to push it even more. I wanted to have husn al-dhan, say, you know what, pray dhuhr long, but he was, no, 3:59 you pray, okay, bismillah, okay. So you pray dhuhr right before you say salam, you look at your watch, it is exactly 4 o'clock. Then you stand up and you pray Asr. This is how most of the Hanafi scholars interpret it. The response is, this is more difficult than qasr itself. I mean, this is like, you're putting an exact barrier and whatnot. But anyway, that's their position, that according to their paradigm, there is no such thing as qasr. Jama'. According to the paradigm, there is no such thing as jama' for the musafir. It doesn't work. Anyway, by the way, this is classical Hanafism. I have many Hanafi teachers who now actually do Jama'. And they say the evidences are too strong. So there must be a current of modern Hanafis that have this. But the standard fatwa that is given is that Jama' is not something that the Musafir is allowed to do. The other three madhabs, of course, they allow Jama' for multiple reasons. The Hanbalis have explicitly allowed it for three reasons. Number one, for safar, for travel. That you may do Jama' for travel. Number two, they say for a type of sickness or ailment that affects your ability to perform salah on time. For example, the hadith of Hamana bint Jahsh, who was a lady who would constantly bleed, constantly. She had istihada, not hayd, istihada, it's a medical issue. So our Prophet told her to combine the salah, that do wudu once. So for example, the one who has urinary incontinence, he's constantly urine or some issue, or high fever and he cannot concentrate. We're talking about an illness that affects. We're not talking about a little hand cut over there. No, you get the point. Something that affects you. Your wudu is affected. Okay, you have an issue, high fever, something. So it is the majority position that you may do Jama' of those salawats. And of course, if you're Jama' and Musafir, you'll do Jama' and Qasr. But if you're sick and you're at home, you will do Jama' without Qasr. Okay? So if you have issue of, let's say, a simple example, like, may Allah protect all of us, but constant vomiting and diarrhea. You're najis, you cannot, so you will become tahir quickly. You have only, you don't know when the next bout is going to come. You will pray Dhuhr and Asr combined. Okay? But in this case, you're not allowed to do 2. You must do 4. So you can combine. This is the second reason. And then the third reason that is allowed, which is explicit in the hadith as well, is allowed in the masjids when there is a weather condition. So if it's snow or raining and the people are praying Dhuhr, we will say, you know what? We don't expect you in dangerous conditions to come back. We'll pray Asr because you'll get the reward of the masjid. Okay, so we'll pray Asr. And Maghrib and Isha as well, pray, and then that's it, you go. Multiple times in life of the Prophet, this happened, that it was raining, and of course we're talking about a rain that's in those days, muddy, roof collapsing, this and that. And even in our times, if it's snowing, something happening, we don't want to put people in danger. Anything that's a bit of not even life-threatening, but it's common sense. We're not talking about a drizzle, obviously. This is up to the Imam to see what is going on. So in these three reasons, Jama' is allowed as well. Now, one point though. Jama' is allowed, but is it the mustahab thing to do? We said Qasr is mustahab by unanimous consensus. Jama' is not mustahab. Jama' is khilaf al-awla. It is against, even in the other madhabs, especially the Hanbali madhab is very clear on this point. Jama' is not the default. And to not do Jama', you will be rewarded. So, the default, you do Qasr, yes. You don't do Jama'. And I have to say, and may Allah forgive me because I take too much laxity in this myself as well, when we do Safar, we just take it the default to do Jama'. And the default is you do Qasr but not Jama'. You pray every Salah on its time. And Ibn Taymiyyah mentions this, that all of these, he mentions many ahadith, all of these shows that Jama' is not from the sunnah of traveling, unlike Qasr. Rather, Jama' is only done when there is a need to do so, regardless of whether one is traveling or not. Therefore, if the traveler needs to do Jama', he may do so. For example, he's on the camel and he's going to have to stop the camel. It's an awkward inconvenience for this person. He may go ahead and do Jama'. However, Ibn Taymiyyah says, as for the one who stops in the village or city for a few days, then his ruling becomes the ruling of the muqim. Not for Qasr, but for Jama'. So he's going to pray Dhuhr at its time. How many? 2. Very good. You guys following this. And Asr at its time. And like that. And Ibn al-Qayyim says that Jama' is not a recommended sunnah, in contrast to what majority of musafirin think. So it's not just our generation. Ibn al-Qayyim also says this. The majority of musafirs, they get lazy and they just think we should do jama'. Rather, jama' is the exception and not the rule. Regardless of whether one is traveling or not, that one should pray salah at its time. That is the default ruling. So, when we are traveling, yes, on the side of the road, you got to step over. Understandably, you don't want to stop again. Go ahead, do jama'. But once you get to the next city, once you are there temporarily, the default, now, because you are musafir, you are not sinful for doing jama'. But it is khilaf al-awla. It is basically, call it makruh. Yani you get reward for doing on its time. Unlike qasr, you get reward for doing qasr. But for jama', you do not get reward. You actually, it's the opposite of that. One other point before I go back to final, that is that there is a common fatwa that everybody asks me about, and it is being propagated. And I am very hesitant to even say it, but only because people say this, that they find on Islamic websites and whatnot, that one can do jama' for no reason. One can do jama' for no reason. And they quote a hadith in Sunan at-Tirmidhi, which is authentic, that our Prophet ﷺ, one day, he combined between Dhuhr and Asr, and then between Maghrib and Isha, and the Rawi says, بِغَيْرِ خَوْفٍ وَلَا safar. There was no khawf, there was no safar, there was no rain, nothing going on. And he did it, and then he said, I wanted to make things easy for my ummah. I did not want to put a haraj on my ummah. Okay, so this hadith is in Tirmidhi, and the Prophet ﷺ did jama' without any reason. Now, we all know that the non-Sunni firqa takes this as the default, and they do jama' every single day of their lives. Right? We know this, or those of you who don't know, I'll just taught you this. Now, this hadith is found in Tirmidhi. At-Tirmidhi himself says, in my entire book, every hadith I mention, you will find ulama that have accepted it except for 3 hadith. 3 hadith, I don't know any alim who ever accepted it. And he mentions this one as well. Accepted meaning the fiqh ruling, that practiced this hadith. That I don't know any alim that practiced this. This is before Tirmidhi. This is not a fatwa that was known before Imam at-Tirmidhi. Nonetheless, some ulama throughout history after Tirmidhi did say, look, the hadith is clear. And so they said that once in a while, if you need to, then you may do jama'. And I am very, very hesitant to open this door, and we should stick with the vast majority of scholars. Now, we are not talking about somebody who has an excuse like, and I've had this come to me, that a doctor is performing an 8-hour surgery, there's certain types of heart surgeries where you have to be there. You literally have to be there. And I actually, you guys tell me, you don't even take a lunch break in that time? But the doctor said, no, we don't. I said, okay, if that is the case and the guy is going to die, that's a darura of death. You don't even need to get a fatwa. Obviously, in that situation. But you're going shopping and you want to do jama'. Match aa raha hai, jama' karke namaz padh lete hain, that's it. You're going to open this door, it's going to be a laugh and a joke, Like just because of a football match, I don't want to do jama' before. I understand if there's like a surgery or something, then you might even be able to make qiyas of sandstorm or, rain falling like that, okay, this is a circumstance. But to open this door and say, if life is awkward, shopping and whatnot, we should not do this. We have to pray on its proper time. Okay, I said I'm going to do one other thing, and then we're done, inshallah. And that other thing is as follows, that from last week, somebody pointed out to me a long semi-article, somebody wrote that they really did not like the fact that I mentioned Queen Elizabeth I. They were very irritated, and they said that I am trying to make fun, a'udhu billah, of the scholars of Islam, a'udhu billah. I have never, a'udhu billah, wanted to do this, but I'm simply teaching you where did these measures come from. And so there was this issue of, I'm trying to be mocking when I mention, Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. Now, one of my mentors said to me, anytime somebody criticizes you, before you become defensive, think, maybe there's an element of truth, and then also understand the psychology of the critic. And in this case, I really don't think I have done anything wrong by telling you a factually correct statement that the person or the entity or the group that defined the mile the way that we understand it is Queen Elizabeth I's era. She got together a group and they passed a law. And just to prove this point, and by the way, the whole issue of how many miles, as we said, there's so many opinions. This many. Suppose we say it is 48 miles. Suppose we say that. Even though the Prophet ﷺ, if anything, there is some things are mentioned in burud and farsakh. Burud and farsakh. Suppose we say 48 miles. I actually wanted to explain to you that what this is. For example, Hajjawi, one of the great scholars of Hanbali Islam, listen to this. He says a mile is 12,000 steps. Every step is 6,000 dhira. Every dhira is 24 fingers in length widthwise. Each finger is 6 grains of barley if you lay them side by side. Each grain of barley is the size of 6 hairs from a work horse called a birdawn. This is how he is defining it. It's not Queen Elizabeth I. And some modern people have tried to calculate this out, and they have gotten varying numbers from 80 to 160. Because what is a dhira? What is a finger? If you understand a finger, if you have 0.1 inch difference, by the time you get to how many fingers is in that, the answer is going to be much larger than. So the variation is so large. Ibn Raf'a, who was the one put in charge in 7th century Cairo of the marketplace, hisabs and measurements, he wrote a book, a chronicle of weights and measurements, and he called it Al-Idah wal-Bayan fi Ma'rifat al-Mikyali wal-Mizan. And he writes in this book that our scholars have differed how much a mile is. The Hanafiya said it is 4,000, this is a dhira, 4,000 dhira. The Malikiyya, some of them, like Ibn Abdul Bar, said it is 3,500. And Ibn Habib said that it is 2,000. And the Suqi said the famous position of the Malikis is that it is 2,000, and some have said it is 3,500. The Shafi'iyya said the mile is 4,000 steps. The Hanabila said the mile is 6,000 dhira, and this is how much they define it. Now, even within, this is a classical book, and I wanted to explain, A'udhu Billah, I'm not making fun of anyone. I'm just saying, and I'm sorry if this offends you, but it is a factually correct statement. If you feel that when you are driving your car, that's what I said, driving your car, I explicitly said that, and when you cross 48 miles of your car odometer, I know exactly what I said, you think that your safar has begun, the car odometer is 48 miles. Who said that's 48? Ibn Qudama? Ad-Dasuqi? An-Nawawi? Ibn Hajar? Where'd you get that from? And I'm sorry to be breaking the news to you, that definition comes from Queen Elizabeth I. Your car odometer was not measured by a classical scholar of Islam. And even in the classical scholars, I just gave you 7 positions about, and this is, by the way, how much is a mile? Even the 48 number is huge controversy. How many burud, how many farsakh, how many, the conversion factors is so much. And so this really does go back to this issue that the reason why I brought this topic was so that we appreciate in a very non-emotional topic. In the end of the day, who cares if you follow the 48 positions? It's not a big deal. I wanted to bring a topic that has no emotion. Why? Because there are topics that are emotionally charged. Gender issues and roles, okay? Societal issues, democracy, living in the secular state. These are much more, people think they know the haqq immediately, and they might quote you a classical position about a modern issue. And I purposely wanted to demonstrate, guys, we respect our ulama immensely, but they're human beings. Had I been alive 1,000 years ago, I would be the same thing. Just because many ulama said 48 miles doesn't make it the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what does that mean? Free for all? No. The other group that they want to stick with the madhabs, I respect them, they are looking at what happened especially in the 80s and 90s, when a certain trend arose and they opened the door for a free for all. And this free for all led to a lot of chaos in the ummah and splintering and deviation. And some have even said that radicalism and these fundamentalist movements are a result, even though that's not fully true, but perhaps there's an element of truth. Perhaps there's an element of truth, because in the end of the day, those movements do stem from the larger movement that did open this door. But I don't think that is the main reason. But they see what happened of opening the door for ijtihad. So this has resulted in a new generation coming, and it's human nature, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. A new generation, much more nuanced, much more, alhamdulillah, educated than the 80s and 90s generation, and they're saying, khalas, we're going to stick with it. Let's not open this door at all. And I appreciate the sentiment. But if we want Islam to flourish, for the more difficult questions, Safar is no big deal. You want to stick to 48? Alhamdulillah. But I purposely went into 2 hours lectures to demonstrate the evolution of fiqh in a case study. I did it on purpose, so that we then have an idea. Now, does this mean all of us in this audience are going to do this? No. Obviously, our ulama do it. And here we go to the final point. My suggestion to all of you is up to you. You choose the alim or the ulama that you think are the most suited. You have to, that's your ijtihad. And there are plenty, and ulama have track records. And I personally look up to a group of ulama across the world, and especially the councils of fiqh. I really look up to them. And generally speaking, I'm sympathetic to that strand of fiqh, which is respectful of the madhabs, but not blind following them. This is my version, that we really respect. And generally, I do follow Hanbali madhab in my personal life, and I follow that. But in some issues, especially in issues that are going to be controversial to the Muslims of our times, difficult for them as a society to follow, we have to rethink through. And that's where fiqh councils come in handy. You have many great ulama. Shaykh Qardawi is there, Shaykh Yusuf al-Judiz, Abdullah Yusuf al-Judiz, look up to Shaykh Saman al-Awda, Shaykh Muhammad Hassan Dado. And these are all within their own way. They're slightly different. They're not all the same, but all of them are on the same wavelength, that we come from the madhabs with respect, but we fine-tune where needed. These are the groups I look up to. Overall, the fatwas I give you generally will come from that school of modern Islamic thought. And I respect that some people find this uncomfortable and they want to stick completely. That's fine. Allah's not going to punish you. Go for it. But I firmly believe if we want our children and their grandchildren to really practice Islam and flourish, we're going to have to rethink through some issues. Not safar. Safar is not a big deal. But just to give you a case study. And with that, inshallah ta'ala, we are done with traveling. Let's get back home. We'll continue, inshallah, next week. As we said, when the musafir gets back home, he is no longer musafir. So he needs to then do that. I'll answer privately, inshallah. We finish up. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallah.